All right. Well, thanks guys for joining us today. On behalf of the Nebraska Culture Change Coalition, I just want to thank you guys for joining us for Coffee with the Coalition every month. We have some great educational opportunities for you guys every month. And if you haven't joined our mailing list, please go to our website to the contact us page and enter your email, and we will get you all of the information you need for our educational events. Today we have Kirsten Reed, who is the Chief Executive Officer for Leading Age Nebraska. Leading Age is a dynamic network of nonprofit organizations providing service and supports to people as they age. In Nebraska, Leading Age represents 65 long-term care organizations and partners with numerous business associates that support the long-term care industry. Prior to joining Leading Age Nebraska, Kirsten spent over 20 years working in administration of home and community-based services for individuals experiencing developmental disabilities. Kirsten has a master's degree in social work as well as a master's in public administration from the University of Nebraska at Omaha. In 2012, Kirsten was named Nebraska Association Social Workers Social Worker of the Year. Kirsten has been part of several training programs, development events, and programs across Nebraska and beyond her career. The Nebraska Culture Change Coalition does collaborate with Leading Age on a lot of educational events, and we are happy to do so. They're great partners for us, and so we're excited to have Kirsten here today. She's going to be talking to us about workforce violence protection, and I'm going to let her take it away.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kelly. I am going to turn off my camera just so I can make sure I'm focusing in all the right places. So thank you so much for having me. This is a really important topic to me, and I think to everyone that is in long-term care services of any type. So we tend to encounter a variety of different issues in terms of supporting those with mental health needs, as well as with our staff, and just trying to create positive work environment and a safe work environment. So one of the tools that I'm very well versed with in terms of creating safe and healthy work environments is the MANT system. And so I wanted to kind of share some information today on what that system is and kind of give you guys just a little bit of rundown of what you could expect if you look at going through that certification program and why that program is so vitally important to long-term care. So as most of us know, there are more and more people just generally in our world that are experiencing more significant mental health disorders. Right now, the CDC says that there's approximately 15% of older adults that are experiencing a mental health disorder. And what we're seeing is that the number of conditions that folks have in terms of mental health and their ability to cope with their mental health condition is increasing as people get older. I also think that this is changing because of how people are choosing to receive services as they grow older. So the more individualized models means that individuals are more one-on-one, which can be more isolating for them. But in terms of staffing, it also puts those caregivers in positions in which they may be more often alone with someone that they're supporting. And if that person experiences a mental health crisis situation, it could put that staff in a more dangerous situation because there just aren't other people around that can help. So, this comes from a variety of things, including a variety of pre-existing mental health disorders that people may have. Also comes from life stressors, dementia. We'll talk a lot about trauma and abuse, and then we've already kind of touched on that isolation and loneliness that folks can experience as they get older. So other reasons that we may want to focus on creating a safe work environment, there's numerous reasons. So any healthcare program that is under the jurisdiction of OSHA, which is that Office of Health and Workplace Safety, they have implemented, they've had implemented for years workplace violence protection programs. But there's currently a proposed rule in place that would require those programs to have a much more significant program and training for all of their staff. Trauma-informed care is also some language that CMS has put out in terms of best practices and in their rules and enforcement. So we have to be making sure that our environments are trauma-informed. We also want to make sure that all of our staff and all the individuals that we support are safe in their environment. So this is a home for so many people that we're supporting. And we need to imagine what it would feel like to not feel safe in our home or in our work environment. And so the congregate setting, so the more people you have in a setting, the more at risk you are for these types of things to occur, because you just have a melding of all of these different thoughts and beliefs and people in those environments. So we want to make sure that we're setting up those environments to be as safe as we possibly can. And the other piece is really with our staff. So our experience, or my experience, is that folks come into human services from a variety of different backgrounds. And those backgrounds may include trauma that they've experienced in their lives. And trauma can affect people in a variety of different ways. And so we want to make sure that we've got a safe environment for them. And then we also want to make sure that our staff are feeling supported. So if staff don't feel safe and supported, they're going to leave. And we all know what that turnover can do to our organizations. So there's lots of reasons that we want to create that safe environment. So a little background on the MANT system. MANT was actually started in 1975, and it was started in response to human services providers that really wanted a better way to help their staff understand how to interact and support folks that have difficult behavior. And they wanted to create a way to keep their staff safe and to make sure that they were not causing harm to anyone that they were supporting. And the MANT system truly believes that their ability to do that comes through positive coaching and communication and building that culture of respect. So I'm going to try to play of what that looks like through the MANT system. So 1 second. Hold on just a second.
We're not getting any sound, Kirsten.
No sound? Well, I was kind of afraid that might not work. Okay.
Kirsten, what I've learned is when you go to share your screen, you want to unshare, then reshare, and down the bottom you want to click share computer sound at the bottom before you click the blue share button.
Boy, that sounds really complicated. Are you guys seeing my screen now?
Yes, so go ahead and unshare your screen, and then you want to reshare it, but when you reshare it and the dialog box comes up, look in the down the left-hand corner, it has a little button that says share computer sound.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Share sound.
Then share again, and you should be good to go.
Are we good?
You may have heard it said that perception is reality. It's a simple idea. Our view of the world and our interactions with others shape our thoughts and feelings. Those thoughts and feelings determine our responses. Our responses become part of our world. This world we create becomes our reality. This idea is at the heart of the MANT system. When we say things like, managing others begins with managing ourselves, or affirming our feelings and choosing our behaviors, we're talking about the ability we all have to alter our perceptions. Consider this insight at the core of trauma-informed care. Don't ask what's wrong, ask what happened. This is a matter of managing our perceptions to create a different world. The MANT system recognizes that disruptive behavior will at times, and always as a last resort, require physical intervention. Our perception is that these interventions should be done as safely, respectfully, and infrequently as possible. We believe our obligation is to provide our instructors and their team members the skills they need to remain physically safe in the most challenging situations. In keeping with this commitment, we are working in 2021 to revise and adapt the MANT system curriculum to meet the challenges that 2020 has presented. We want to adjust our insight and the language that we use to explore and evaluate the situational application of our teaching. Today, we ask, what are the most extreme threats of violence your staff are facing? We use the answer to that question to shape the curriculum we teach. We want to shift to a conversation that asks the question, what is the maximum level of physical or verbal aggression that you want to be present for your staff and those served 1 year from today? With this shift in perspective, we can explore what today's level is and how we can build a learning and action plan to get your organization to where it needs to be. It's time to stop worrying about how to handle difficult situations. Instead, let's start building a safer, happier workplace so that your staff and the people you serve can say, in this place and with these people, I feel safe.
Okay, now can you guys hear me is the question. Okay, and I need to share my screen again. Okay. Very good. All right. Well, that's just a little bit of an overview of what the MANT system looks like. And for some reason, I lost my ability to see my other half of my screen. Okay, so there's a few, MANT breaks down their system into 3 separate categories. So the first category is the relational skills that they teach. And in those relational skills, we have a variety of topics about building healthy relationships and about how we can make sure that we are providing the best support possible for folks. Sorry, my screen share just went away. Okay, are we back? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. So they talk about building healthy relationships and how we can make sure that we're providing the best relationship. And that's not only for our coworkers, but also for those that we're supporting. And how do we build those healthy relationships? How do we build healthy communication? How do we handle it when there are conflicts that we need to resolve? And those relational skills are really the basis for the entire curriculum that MANT provides. The second piece is that conceptual skills. So they take those relational skills and they kind of put them into practice through trauma-informed care and also positive behavior intervention supports, or what they call PBIS. And then the last section that they have is on those physical skills. And when we're talking about physical skills, we're really talking about everything from how do we assist or support those that might need our physical assistance, and then all the way through, as he said in the video, to handling what the most difficult behavioral situations are that we might encounter. And what I love about the MANT system is that, as he said, we're not going to those extremes in those situations unless the situation that we're dealing with calls for that kind of an intervention. So in MANT, they start out talking about the Moray culture, and the Moray culture is really a holistic life view of what someone may need, or that they do need to have in their lives in order to feel whole. And so they break that down into 4 different areas. They look at psychological health. They look at someone's physical health, they look at their family health, and they look at their spiritual health. And those are like the 4 walls of your house. And so if we can imagine that you have these, 4 walls of this beautiful home, and all of those walls are solid and stable, and they're built with bricks, and there's no cracks in those walls. That gives you a very solid foundation for how you're moving through life. But if the walls of your house are damaged, if there's a tornado that came through and it's affecting your physical health because you can't get to where you need to go, or it's affecting your spiritual health, and they're not talking about religion here. It's really about that spiritual well-being of believing that you are safe in your environment and that you have this trusted source around you. So they're looking at all of those concepts and making sure that people feel like they are safe in that environment. So what this really does is it builds someone's support. And it makes sure that they are able to get through those complications that we might have in life. So I'm going to do a little exercise with you, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to do a video with you guys. So I want you to take a piece of notebook paper out, and I want you to divide your paper in 4. So right down the middle and then straight through across the other side. And I want you to label each of those 4 quadrants of your paper. So the first quadrant is going to be family. The second one is going to be psychological. The third one is going to be spiritual. And then that last one is going to be physical. Okay. So what I want you to think about is I want you to think about, over the course of your career, someone that you may have supported. And if you're not working in long-term care or any kind of human services, think about someone in your life that you supported. It doesn't need to be in a paid capacity that you were doing that work, but I want you to think about someone that you supported that may have had a difficult time that they were experiencing. And I want you to write down, take just a few minutes and write down in those 4 quadrants, what were the things that they were experiencing in that quadrant that may have been impacting their ability to manage or get through that situation. So I'll give you just a few minutes to do that. Someone asked about the 4 quadrants again. So I put up the slide from the Maori culture in New Zealand, and that has our 4 quadrants. So one of the important things about the Maori culture is that they really believed that we need to meet people where they are so that we can help them build the walls of their home together. So we accept people exactly where they are in their lives, and people are going, I think we find this in aging services, people are going to come to us who they are, and we need to figure out how we can better support them. And it's especially important that we learn how to support them when their house is already damaged. So when it may need to be rebuilt in order for them to feel truly safe. So hopefully you've had a chance to kind of think about that person and jot down some notes about them. So we're going to hold on to that list for a little while, and we're going to come back to it, I promise. Okay. So we're going to talk about the relationship between trust and trauma. So there is a very distinctive relationship. Folks who've had traumatic experiences or neurological changes such as dementia, they can go through, they can both cause a loss in their identity and their social inclusion and their dignity and respect. And so the MANT system is really designed to address both of those traumatic experiences and neurological changes to really prevent all of that from happening. So they want to make sure that at all times, people are being treated with dignity and respect as they move through life. Even in the most challenging times, people still need to be treated with dignity and respect. One of the very key concepts of MANT is a system that an acronym that they call RADAR. And RADAR is about how are we going to observe all of the situations that are going to be happening around us in our environment all the time. So this is your typical problem solving and making sure that your eyes are open to these experiences. So the first step in that process is to recognize. So we talk about a lot through the MANT system that you need to keep your radar on. That just really means you need to have your antennas up. You need to have your eyes and ears open. You need to be open to the things that could become problematic in your environment so that you can react in a proactive way. The second piece of that system is to assess. And really, there's 3 things that we are assessing at all times. The first one is we're assessing the environment, what's going on around us. The second piece is that we're assessing the individuals or the folks that we're supporting in that environment. We need to be assessing where they're at. And then the third thing that most importantly, I think that we need to be assessing is ourselves. So anyone who's worked in human services knows that we can often get overwhelmed and possibly not react in the best manner. And we need to realize when we have maybe met our match for that moment and when we need to step away as well. So we need to be able to affirm our own feelings and choose our own behavior, which is a big piece of the MANT program. From there, we need to decide. We need to review those options that we have after we've assessed all of that, and we're going to make that determination as to how are we going to move forward, which of those things are we going to try to implement. And really important when we're deciding what we want to do is not to overstep something that could have been done another way. So we've all heard that saying of using a sledgehammer when a fly swatter would have worked. We want to make sure that we're applying the right solution and the least restrictive solution to that situation. And then the last piece, or the second to last piece, is that we're going to act. So we're going to implement whatever that solution was that we decided on to address. And then the last piece is that we're going to follow up and we're going to review those results. And in reviewing those results, we usually, in MANT, they talk about a 3-step debriefing process so that we can truly get through to the heart of what may have led to that particular incident occurring and what we can do to prevent it in the future, and how we can make sure that everyone is safe while still giving people that environment to be able to get out their own frustrations and feelings. Okay, so another really important piece of the MANT system is the crisis cycle. So they really focus a lot of their work on teaching and understanding what the crisis cycle means and how it impacts people. So as you can see here, it kind of climbs to become this mountain, and everyone kind of starts at a baseline phase. But we also need to realize that those who've experienced a really high degree of trauma in their lives, or maybe a really critical event, they may be sitting more at that stimulus or trigger phase as their natural layer of being. So sometimes people are just in a highly escalated state where they may start out a little bit higher in the crisis cycle. So when we're engaging the radar system, we're scanning that environment, and we're looking for things that might be happening. And what we're really looking for is what those stimulus or triggers might look like in our environment. And from there, we're deciding, how we need to respond to those situations. And as people move through the crisis cycle, our goal is to listen and to identify what might be happening, and so that we can figure out how we can best support that person. And the goal in any of these situations is to be able to respond in such a way that doesn't hit the top of that crisis cycle, so that we're not having to use any of those interventions, but we're really looking for how do we meet people's needs. So another piece of what they talk about in MANT, we've all heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I love this diagram because it really takes both that crisis cycle and Maslow, and it melds them together. And what we really need to focus on is that when people are in a crisis state of mind, they are not thinking, we have another slide that talks about what part of their brain they are actually thinking with. And when folks are at the crisis cycle, all they're really thinking of is, how am I getting my basic human needs met? And then it's inverted based on how we are normally reacting to situations. When they're in that higher escalation, it's usually because they are not feeling safe and they are not feeling secure. And so we need to think about, how are we going to respond to those situations? And that, when someone's reaching the higher escalation phases or even crisis phases, that's not the point in time that we are trying to rationalize with someone or give them, tips and tricks on how they should be approaching life. This is really when we're to the point where we are making sure that we're engaging them and we're cueing them towards safer behaviors. And the other side of the crisis cycle, as people come down, they need to get to that stabilization phase. And that's really when we can do that proactive listening, figuring out what might be causing that problem, even if we're not implementing any of those solutions at this point, because you can see the next phase of that is what they call the post-crisis drain. And we've all felt that when we've been so incredibly invested or involved in something, or so angry that we then just feel completely worn out and emotionally exhausted. And we have to provide people that time to truly recover from that. So the other piece that they talk about in MAIA is building healthy relationships. So obviously in every communication, there is this context, and context has a variety of things that are surrounding it. We're choosing how we're going, person's going to decode it, and we've got all these different things happening. But at the same time, we also have all of this external things that are impacting our conversation. And so sometimes we might think that we are communicating very effectively, but in reality, there was so much noise that was surrounding what we were trying to say, or maybe we chose the wrong channel. Maybe we chose the way that we encoded that message was not a way that the person could understand. And we see this sometimes with different generations. We see this sometimes with people from different backgrounds. It's just really important to make sure that the person is truly hearing and receiving the message that we're giving them. So in that healthy communication, we want to make sure that those interpersonal skills are coming through so that we're creating that very positive work environment for both our employees and those that we're supporting. A really important thing to remember is that all behavior is communication. Everything that we do every day is communicating something. And so what that might be communicating is all based on how we are reviewing that information and what the antecedent or the precursor to that behavior, how that impacted us. So the slide here really talks about two very common antecedents that we might have, and they demonstrate it with a dog. So if that dog is sitting down, it might be inviting us, that they want to get something from us. So they may want our attention, or they may want a treat, or they may want something. And so the way that that dog is presenting itself to us is going to get us what they are wanting in that situation. On the other hand, if that dog is barking or growling or presenting itself in that way to us, then that might cause us to respond in a way that we want to get away from that. So how we respond to those behaviors will determine what the consequences of that behavior are. So when my son was young, he was faced with the barking dog, and his response to that situation was that he wanted to get away, and he started running away from that dog. Well, what happens when you run away from a barking dog that's angry? It's going to chase you. That's why everybody says, don't run away. And he did, and he unfortunately ended up getting tackled by that dog and got bit. Well, that kind of reinforced to him those consequences of doing that. And when we talk about consequences, we're not talking about anything that we're inputting into that situation, but we're really talking about those natural consequences. So for a very long time, he had a pretty large fear of dogs. And if he was faced with a dog, he was very timid and very uncomfortable. And so we really had to work on reprogramming those antecedents. What are we looking for? How do we need to respond in those situations? And really the point of this is that everything that we see in those that we're working with is them trying to communicate some need to us. So that need could be that they're needing to get something from us, or that they're trying to avoid something that is making them feel unsafe or uncomfortable. And our job as professionals is to be able to distinguish what those behaviors are and how we can support them to get their needs met. So that's kind of the point of the communication piece. We talked about a little bit about this, about debriefing, and in the MANT model, they really talk about that there's all these different ways that we can review the incident. And so we do that kind of in this 3-part process. And one of the reasons that we're doing that is because we need to make sure that we're getting all of that conflict out and that we're looking at everybody's perceptions of that situation. So one of the examples that we use is, how many legs do you see here? Anybody got guesses?
Mhm.
Yeah, depending on how you look at this, you could see 4 legs, you could see 5 legs, and you can see how people might have those different interpretations of how many legs are there. So it's very important that we're able to review what everybody's ideas are. This is that slide that was really talking about how the brain processes stress. So you can see that when we are in the baseline phases of our, we're able to process with our neocortex and the bigger pieces of our brain. But as we climb this crisis cycle, we're working towards the back of our brain. So we're no longer thinking in our right mind, so to speak. We're not thinking with the front of our brain. So as we travel through that crisis cycle, our ability to reason, to rationalize, to understand our behavior and how our behavior may impact others is completely out the window. And so at the top of that crisis cycle, we're really reacting in those distinctual, barbaric, caveman sort of ways, with this only piece of our brain being used as the brainstem. And so then, as you can see, as we come back down, we're coming into those more rational thoughts where we're able to express ourselves a little bit more. And as staff, our ability to interject and address those situations really comes through our ability to communicate and the relationship that we have, and how do we interact with that person to maybe direct them towards healthier alternatives or safer alternatives if they're reaching that crisis point. So in order to do that, not only do we need to be able to communicate, but we need to be able to have really healthy relationships, both with those around us, our coworkers, but also with those that we're supporting. And one way that we really look at this through MANT is, what kind of a compromise or what kind of a solution are we looking at when we're getting into these situations? And what we're really striving for here is, in this upper quadrant, we're really looking for, how do we make this situation a win-win situation? That is the collaborative way of thinking about problems and how we're going to resolve anything that we might be experiencing. So what happens when we are in this win-lose or lose-lose or even the win-lose situations? Someone's always losing, right? And we don't want to be in those situations where one party is not getting anything that they're striving to get. If they're not getting their needs met from us, then they will continue to resort to whatever that behavior was that we were experiencing that we're actually trying to eliminate. So we really want to avoid those situations in which anyone is losing. No one likes to be on the losing side. So in those situations where it's not possible to have a win-win, then we're going to really strive to do that compromise and get folks in some agreement on where we have common ground. This slide really just shows the relationships that exist between trauma and how our ability to have those relationships with folks can impact the types of trauma that they might be experiencing. So in MANT, we talk about acute traumatic episodes. Those are those, things that happen, natural disasters, car accidents, one point in time types of trauma. And then the other part of that is that behavior or betrayal trauma. And betrayal trauma is where we see a lot of the abuse and neglect, things that happen to us that we are definitely not have any control over either, but that may have a longer term impact on our lives. Episodic trauma can definitely have a long-term impact. It just might be caused by different means. So when we talk about the betrayal trauma, one of the things that we talk about is ACEs. How many of you have heard of ACEs? No? Okay. So ACEs stands for the Adverse Childhood Experience Survey. So these are, it's a survey that can be done with folks of any age, and there are actually some very common key indicators, such as abuse that they may have gone through in their lives, traumatic events, losses of a loved one, variety of different things that have actually been shown to have long-term impacts on people's lives. And the more things that people experienced, the higher likelihood it was that they were going to have impacts later in their lives. So as you can see here, there was some studies done that had, the number of people that had experienced some abuse or trauma in their lives, and 33%, so about a third of our population in this study, said that they didn't have any ACEs. So there were no things in their lives that they'd experienced that they would consider adverse. But when we start talking about abuse and neglect and the losses of loved ones and other traumatic events that have impacted us, you can see how those numbers increase. And what this study really found was that those that had 4 or more of those ACEs marked in their survey, the higher the likelihood was that they were going to have some event or behavior, so to speak, in their lives that was going to maybe complicate things. And other things that this study has told us is that even though we have experienced some of those things, if we have not transcended that trauma, it doesn't go away. So we've all had someone in our lives that we've seen that has, or that we've worked with that really, they're still dealing with experiences from their childhood that maybe they have not been able to get through yet. And those experiences could be impacting them in ways that we may not understand. Okay. Like I said, the impacts of trauma that people see could change how they see the world. It can also increase their medical concerns, their social isolation, their quality of life, or their length of life. And this is one of the reasons that we are really seeing an increase in the number of people that have trauma or maybe some behavioral disturbances that are coming into long-term care settings and services because they have experienced all of these things. So you all remember that piece of paper that you had? We're going to pull that paper back out, and we're going to talk a little bit about how this trauma may have impacted people. So we've all got our paper, and we've got some things written on our paper. And I want to tell you a little bit about my person that I wrote this on. And this is someone that I supported for multiple years. And we started services with her when she was 16 years old. So she was a young woman. And in her family category, some of the things that I have written down are that she was a foster child initially. And we were, in her life, we were the 28th placement that she had been in her life. 28. She was 16. It's more than 2 a year. So because of that, she was not able to build any bonds with anyone. And she had been in foster care, adopted, given up for adoption, repeated cycles over and over again. And then in her psychological area, that obviously that led to a lot of feelings of abandonment in her life, school system failures. She also had a lot of multiple learning disabilities and those kinds of things. She was on a variety of medications, and she would get very hyper focused on different things and was not easily redirected at times. Spiritually, she was exposed to religion, a variety of different religions, and was very much wanted to have that in her life. And unfortunately, because of some behaviors that she experienced in a house of worship, she was kicked out of multiple churches. And so think about the impact of that as she's going through life and how that would have impacted her. And then physically, she was a little bit overweight, a little bit sluggish, probably because of all the medications that she was on. She had a beautiful smile, and she could go on for hours. She was just one of those full of energy kind of people. So I want you to think about the person that you wrote down, and I want you to think about each one of these categories. And if there's something on here that was a negative thing that was negatively impacting their life and could have caused them some trauma, I want you to tear off that piece of your paper. So we'll give you a minute, and I want you to tear off your pieces. Okay, well, hold up your papers. You can hold them up backwards if you need to. Yeah. So think about the electronic version. That's good. Think about that person's life, and are they truly feeling whole? And are they feeling safe? And are they able to experience everything in life based on that? No. So usually when I'm in class, I actually do this with a paper bag. And so we're really able to see like all the things that are trying to come into our paper bag, but our paper bag can't hold any of that because maybe the floor is gone or the side is completely gone. And we can really see what that impact looks like as we go forward. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. So the other thing that I really want people to understand is that trauma can have impact on caregivers as well. And so we may, as professionals or even family caregivers, we may run into those feelings of being overwhelmed or having lapses in judgment, or just feeling burnout and fatigue. And those secondary trauma responses are often what leads people to abusive or neglectful interactions and not treating people with dignity and respect. And so we really want to make sure that we're continually addressing with our staff this idea of secondary trauma and the impacts that it can have on us as caregivers. And we also need to realize that, you know, caregivers and those that work in human services are not perfect either. They tend to come with their own trauma and their own things in their lives as they walk through our doors. And then, you know, number of times I, as a supervisor had said, well, you got to check it at the door. Life doesn't work that way. We don't really get to check our feelings at the door because they follow us everywhere, and they follow us through our behavior and how we interact with others and how we treat other people all of the time. So, you know, I always say no one wakes up and says, you know, I think I'm going to go abuse somebody today. It is simply because they are feeling overwhelmed and they don't know the response for that situation that can often lead to those lapses in judgment and the responses that we have. So I'm going to try to push through a few different things here, but, you know, we've kind of talked about the number of trauma experiences that people have and the impact that that can have on their lives. And what we're really striving for is every aspect that comes in our life that can really impact our quality of life. And everything's kind of coming in through a funnel. The good and the bad and the ugly are all coming in. And if we think about, these different things that might put a monkey wrench into how we perceive life and what our quality of life is, if we're experiencing pain, or if we don't have social capital, or if we've lost hope, then all of those things can impact us. And if you look at the 4 things that are really coming through on that quality of life, it's really tied back to the Maori culture and those 4 walls of our house. So we need to really truly address how we're going to build people up. So one of the other pieces of MANT we talked about earlier was this positive behavior intervention support. Commonly it's referred to as PBIS. And positive behavior intervention support is how do we support people that are struggling with trauma or maybe having unhealthy responses, or what some would call behaviors. Like I said, everything is a behavior and all behavior is communication. So I really prefer to view that as an unhealthy response to a situation. So first, we have to remember that all of those behaviors are communication, and that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. And we need to figure out how are we going to respond to these situations. And MANT does this through a hierarchy of gradual interventions. And so we really can, try to spend all of our time at the bottom of this grid, where we're really focused on, communication and philosophical ideas and beliefs about how people need to be treated. And as their behavior increases in maybe the intensity or the severeness, then we're looking at how can we support, or how can we avoid, or how can we redirect those kinds of things into more positive actions. And then at the is how are we going to address that if we're in imminent danger situations in which people need to have some sort of physical assistance in order to remain safe for themselves or for others. And so the way that we really look at this is in that tiered system. Not everyone is going to need the same amount of support all the time. And so what we're really looking at is the universal interventions that we are offering to everyone all the time. We should be engaging in those positive, well-rounded routines of things that are stimulating and that are going to be positive contributions to their quality of life. And that second tier is when folks might need a little bit more encouragement or support in order for them to maintain that quality of life. So what are we going to do? How are we going to do that? So one of my examples that I give is, I was the administrator for a day program. And so I wasn't always out in the day program, but sometimes when I would, cross through, and I tried to make my rounds a couple times during the week, or as many as I could. And as I'm walking through and walking across the floor, it was very common that everyone kind of wants to see me because I'm the novelty, but I would, do a little wave or, high five or something like that to folks. And that would usually work for the majority of folks to make them feel recognized and make sure that they knew that I saw them and that they were there. There was one gentleman, though, that if I didn't really take that time to engage with him on like that tier 2 level, where I was making a very distinct effort to make sure that he knew that I was there and give him that positive reinforcement that he needed, that he would end up causing a significant commotion. So that could include yelling, or waving his arms in the air, might include hitting someone. Sometimes it was me because he would, run after me, those kinds of things, or even flipping a table over, those kinds of things. So I quickly learned that what Matt needed was this more intense positive reinforcement from me that was contributing to his quality of life. And so what I would do is I would make sure that when I came in, I eyeballed the area with that radar, and I knew exactly where he was. I knew exactly what his mood was. And I knew that I needed, what he needed at that moment. And I would really make a distinct effort, which is kind of hard because you don't want to leave anyone out, and there may not be time to go interact with 20 different people. But I really made sure that him and I made eye contact, and we had a fist bump, or we had a high five, or we had a, hey, you look great today, kind of interaction on that more frequent basis. And that's kind of how we address that tiered system. The other thing I think we need to remember is that not all behavior needs to change. So we need to think about what is that behavior and how is it impacting us and how is it impacting them? Is it really impacting their health and safety? Or is it just a different behavior? So one of the things that I talk about with my dad that's had dementia for 10 years is that he has this clearing his throat all the time. It is a compulsive behavior for him. And it's a different behavior. It is absolutely not dysfunctional. It is not distressful, and it is definitely not dangerous. It's not hurting him, and it's not hurting us. It's not interfering with his quality of life. But what we found was that during COVID, and we would be out in public, and he was consistently clearing his voice or clearing his throat, that would cause people to look at us a little bit differently. And so we really needed to think about, how is this impacting him with people looking at him, and is it drawing more attention to him? And so what we figured out was if we could give him a cough drop or a lozenge or something, that it took his mind off of needing to clear his throat, or maybe the need to clear his throat. So now we carry everything like Tums and mints and all these different things. So in a way, we're addressing that behavior in one way, but we're not putting any sort of what I would call interventions in place that are doing that on a regular basis. And we're not stopping him from doing it. I'm going to pass through a couple of these slides. But the other thing we need to think about is, what is the actual threat that we have, and is it a reality? So we need to be thinking about, how significant is this threat? I've had any number of people say that they're going to do any number of horrible things to me or the building or the staff or whatever. But there's generally a level of assessment that you can do that makes you think, is this reality? Are they really going to do this? So we need to not overreact. Again, not using that sledgehammer when the fly swatter would do. So we need to think about things in that way. The other piece is that need for physical interaction or intervention. And that's everything from assisting or accompanying people all the way through to any kind of redirection or restraint that might need to be in place. We really don't want to, at any point in time, we talk a lot about touch in the MANT system, and we really don't want to at any time put our hands on someone, because that can be very invasive, even if it is accompanying them or assisting them or helping to escort them. We don't want to put ourselves in that situation, and we don't want the person that we're supporting to be in that situation either. So we really need to think about, when do we need to use physical touch in those situations? So that's kind of the summary of the MANT system and why it is used and what it can do for an environment. There are a number of dates that Leading Age is going to be offering these trainings. They are in person. They're certified 2-year trainings. One of the questions that I often get is, are these trainings something that everyone in the environment has to go through? No. So there are some workplaces that they mandate that everyone goes through this. And if that's what you decide to do for your workplace, we can help you to get your own trainer to be able to do those things. But in a lot of situations, you know, it might just be a couple people that try this out, or that interact with folks that may be experiencing some higher level crisis situations. Even though we really feel like this is a curriculum that's great for everyone in human services. So that should kind of wrap up where I am now. And I don't see that there are any questions or anything. And I know Kelly had to jump off. So if there's no other questions, we will go ahead and say goodbye for today. Thanks for joining us.
Kirsten, thank you. That was really awesome. I think what it brought up for me is how important it is also to be paying attention to the environment, the context within which people are living and working. And sometimes when we're working in those environments, or we're in our office all day and we're not even paying attention to the energy and the body language and the pace and all those kinds of things, we're actually contributing to the very things that we are now talking about how to prevent and head off. And I think it's so important as leaders to like just get a bead on the kind of environment you're created and what's in there that might be triggering people. And just so thank you. I love it. Thank you.
We spend so much time on that in MANTS. It is very much a curriculum that focuses on all those aspects, and it's very important to address those. Yeah.
Good job. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Kirsten.
All right. Have a good one. See you next month.
Bye, guys.
Bye.